Okay, in this video we're going to talk about how to analyze an argument. This is perhaps one of the most important concepts that I want you to learn in this class, or anyone taking an English 101 class. They're trying to teach you how to think, right? This is the lesson where we talk about how to think about how other people think, which is incredibly important because it helps to influence you and how you think by knowing how others think. Make sense? So we're going to be talking about a lot of important things. When I say an argument, I'm not talking about, someone's going to fight. And not every argument is contentious. An argument is a point that you're trying to make. Or you might see people use the term a claim. An argument might have several claims, but a claim is, it's a main point. It's something you're trying to argue, something you're trying to persuade others to agree with in some way or another. So, with that understanding, let's talk about how to go about understanding someone else's argument. Again, with the foresight that you will be learning how to do it yourself. Okay? So, one of the first things you need to do is try to read with an open mind. You need to be able to look at the evidence for what it is, not based on just the context of what you think or how it's been presented to you, but be able to look at it objectively. So, you need to look at all sides of the argument. You need to understand what are the different sides and what evidence is being used to support those different viewpoints. If you don't read with an open mind, if you don't look at all the evidence, you are doing yourself a disservice because you are literally being closed-minded and you will not understand what the argument is, right? If you just base it off of a preconceived decision on what the point is, it's so hard to understand it because as a process you are blocking information out, and that is it's a horrible process. It's a horrible process. It's afraid that you're going to hear something that you don't want to agree with, but you might. The whole process with argumentation is that you go through an unbiased process to make a decision that you can defend. So you need to be willing to change your mind at any point in the process if it turns out that one side is superior to the other. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right. As you look at someone else's argument, you also need to think about the different ways they present their viewpoint. Because not all of them are logical, but all of them are relevant. So you need to think about the emotional, the ethical, and the logical appeals that the author makes. Now, when we put all these together, we have a big fancy word for it, and we call it rhetoric. Rhetoric is sometimes referred to as a product. Sometimes we refer to it even as a verb. What it is it's the product of someone's reasoning, right? Someone's thought through something and they're presenting it. That presentation, how they present it, and what is actually presented, we refer to as rhetoric. And when we look at these different sides, these different appeals, they help us to look at the whole picture of someone's rhetoric so that we can understand it as a whole, because it's all relevant. Okay, so let's talk about emotions. If we go back to the Greek, emotion, we think about the word pathos. We see the word pathos in sympathy, empathy, how we care or feel about something. If someone's talking about, we're trying to save the earth, the earth is gonna die or whatever, right? They're trying to appeal to our emotions. It's not just, it should include a logical argument, but trying to get you to feel for something is not logical. It's it's the pathos, it's the emotional side of the argument. See, they go together, but they're not the same, right? So we need to be aware of how people appeal to our emotions so that we can understand how we're being affected, but also we can turn the table later so that we know how to appeal to others' emotions to be effective as we present information. Now, we may think that this is a way to manipulate someone. It's not inherently manipulative. It's thoughtful to think about who you're presenting to and to be able to present it in a distinct way for them. Okay? So, thinking about your audience, thinking about their emotions is significant and important. You need to think about how others present information to you. Okay, so let's talk about ethics. When we think of ethics, we usually use that word to think of right and wrong. That's not the original intent of the word. The original translation of the word, ethos, which ethics comes from, means character. Not character as in like the main character of a story, but someone's character, kind of who they are, right? Someone's character has to do with their credibility and whether you can trust them. Now, the trustworthiness of a source, of an author, is incredibly important. It always reminds me of the story of the boy who cried wolf, right? The boy who cried wolf, he's got this job, he's supposed to watch sheep, and they've got the security system. The security system is, if he calls wolf, the whole town is supposed to come to defend the flock. So, first day he's out there, he's like, oh, this is boring, this is lame. And so he says, wolf, 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 wolf. Everybody comes out, what? Where's the wolf, where's the wolf? And they're ready to defend the sheep, and he tricked them. And he lost credibility. And he says, you're stupid. So they go back and they're kind of mad, whatever. The next day he does it again. He says, wolf, 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 wolf. They all come out, where's the wolf, where's the wolf? We're going to kill that. No, there's no wolf. And so they lost all trust in him. His ethos was ruined because he tricked them. He lied to them. So on the third day, when the wolf actually shows up and he cries, wolf, 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 there was no one to come save him because they didn't believe him anymore. So, what's the lesson? Your ethos, yourself as an author, you cannot do things that ruin the trust between you and your reader. If you do that, it doesn't matter what you say, they won't listen to you. We see that in politics all the time. Because someone is a Republican or someone is a Democrat, we just stop listening. Because someone is a Republican or someone is a Democrat, we just stop listening to them. Because we don't trust that. We have no credibility there. And so it's really hard for people to cross sides or to present a logical argument when people won't listen. And that's something that you can't control. All you can do is try to maintain trustworthiness for yourself. Now, this is important. When you are looking at a source, you need to know whether they're trustworthy or not. Are they credible? Are they biased? And are they going to present information honestly? Or can you anticipate that it's going to be twisted a little bit? And you just have to be aware of it. Because if you're going to use that source, you have to know what other people know about that source and whether they trust it or not. Because it's going to affect your credibility. So that being said, we've talked about the emotional, we've talked about the ethical, then it comes to the actual argument itself, which is the logic, the logos. The logic of the argument has nothing to do with who is saying it or how it's said. The logic of the argument should be free from bias. Something should be logical no matter who presents it or how it's presented. So, you need to make sure that your argument or the argument of those that you analyze is free from mistakes. Mistakes in logic, we call that a logical fallacy. There we go. We call it a logical fallacy. A logical fallacy is a mistake in logic. It's something like, think of celebrities, right? I like to think of Shaquille O'Neal. He advertises so many different products, right? So he has good and bad examples. Many years ago, he used to advertise for Buick. And the ad was, he's a really big guy, he can fit inside this car comfortably. That's logical, right? Now they use a famous person because people recognize him. They didn't just take any tall person off the street, they take one that people know, and that people know, oh, he's really big, right? So him getting into the car and saying that this is comfortable, people are going to believe him. That makes sense. But he also advertises Gold Bond lotion. So what is his expertise in lotion? I don't know. Maybe because he's bigger, he has more skin? It's not logical to use him. They found someone that would work. Someone that people know. Someone who can go with a big goofy grin, and they go with it. Is there any credibility there? No, there's not. And so it's kind of a logical fallacy to expect people to buy lotion because Shaq sold it, right? It's just like Michael Jordan with Hanes. What does he know about underwear that I don't? I don't know. He's older than me. No, there's no logic to it, right? There's no logic at all. And yet, we see it over and over and over again. It's based on a logical fallacy that because you are familiar with them, you're comfortable with them, that you will trust the product. But there's no logic to it. Make sense? Okay, so we also have the post hoc fallacy. This one we see in a lot of different variations, that people try to argue that because one thing happened and something else happened afterwards, that there's a connection. But it's like saying, okay, on the night of April 14th, John Wilkes Booth shot Abraham Lincoln in the head at the Ford Theater, and the next day, on April 15th, the Titanic sank. So, ergo, John Wilkes Booth shooting Abraham Lincoln in the head sank the Titanic. Those facts are true, right? April 14th and April 15th, those things happened. There's a lot of years in between, and there is no causation. But sometimes people make ridiculous claims like that. Well, if you do this, this is going to happen because it's happened before. It sounds logical. But if there is no real connection, it's a post hoc fallacy. So we have to be careful not to claim things that aren't actually logical, right? Another bad example is when someone presents a viewpoint from another argument, but they don't present the strongest aspects of the viewpoint. They pick on the weakest things, as if they are the strongest things. It's called the straw man fallacy because, you're painting a weak figure that you can just knock over as if they're made out of straw. But it's not logical. There's so many examples of this. It comes up all the time in politics. So many different versions of these mistakes in reasoning. What it does is inherently it may be used to trick people, and maybe it works. But when people recognize that you're trying to trick them, you lose credibility, and you don't want to do that. The honest, objective thing to do through a thoughtful, reasoned process is to look at the evidence and to present it and simply side with the side that's stronger. Acknowledge where things are strong and acknowledge where things are weak, and justify your example by explaining it. You don't have to trick people when your argument is logical. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to agree with you, but they can't say that it doesn't make sense in a way if they themselves are using a similar reasoned logical process to evaluate what you're saying. Now, not everybody does this. Some people are terrible at this, but it's still true. Use logic. It's going to help you out. Okay? So, all right, let's look at what we've got here. Yeah. Okay, so as you're analyzing the argument, I backed up a slide. You need to look at what the author's claims are. What is their thesis statement? What's the point they're trying to make? Because that's their promise to you that your inherent responsibility as the reader is to double check their work. Are you keeping your promise to me? You said you would do this, and if you don't, they lose credibility, right? Okay, so you look at the reason for the claim. Does the author support the claim logically? Not just emotionally, not just ethically, but can they use logic to support it? What evidence do they use? Is it enough evidence to prove the point? And what assumptions does the author make for what is not said? What assumptions are they making about you? Now, maybe they're accurate, but what is not addressed that they take for granted or they assume? Because that could identify a mistake in logic as well. Okay, so that being said, there are a lot of things to think about, a lot of good sources, but when you are analyzing something, you need to understand that the person who wrote this, or the people who wrote this, they're trying to accomplish something. We give them the benefit of the doubt. They're trying to accomplish something. And when you look at their rhetoric, it helps to identify it. And then you can criticize it. You can analyze their rhetoric to identify whether it's effective or not. Look at how they present it and what's actually presented for its own merits. Not just, oh, I like so-and-so, so I agree with them. No, because that is not logical. That's based on emotion, or it's based on ethics, right? So when we can separate these things, we start to think rhetorically, and we really start to analyze things for what they say, not just for how they're said or who's saying it. So I hope that this video was helpful to you. It'll help you as you write your own critical analyses, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.